My name is Barrett Reed. I am 26 years old, a ceramic artist living quietly in Livingston, a small town nestled in the Paradise Valley, where the Yellowstone River flows lazily and the mountain winds carry the scent of fresh pine every morning. That day, Livingston was so quiet that I could clearly hear the steady spin of the pottery wheel beneath me, the soft glide of clay over my fingertips, the low rumble of the kiln like an old friend whispering. My pottery studio, the Still Hands, sits at the end of a narrow cobblestone street, its windows flung wide to welcome the mountain breeze, the smell of damp earth and glaze permeating the space. I was shaping a tall vase with a slender neck and flared mouth, the style my grandfather once praised as having soul. Then suddenly the phone rang. Once, then twice. I wasn't in a hurry. Customers often called early in the morning while friends texted. I wiped my hands on my apron and glanced at the screen. The name appeared. Mom. My heart seemed to stop. 8 years. 8 years since the day I quietly left Bozeman without a goodbye, without a call, without a message. I had thought she had forgotten I existed. My hands trembled slightly, clay stuck in the crevices between my fingers, and I stood there, staring at the flashing screen like a warning. I picked up. Hello? My voice was hoarse, as if my throat were clogged with clay. Barrett. Her voice trembled, unfamiliar, as if she were speaking from another world. Grandpa Tucker. He's gone. The room suddenly fell silent. The pottery wheel stopped spinning. The kiln's rumble vanished. All that remained was the pounding of my heart in my ears. The vase in my hands, the one I had been shaping for 3 days, slipped from my fingers, fell to the tile floor and shattered. Shards of porcelain flew everywhere, clay splattered onto my legs, sticking to my jeans. I didn't bend down to pick them up. I couldn't move. Grandpa, the only one who had ever truly seen me, the only one who had ever hugged me without needing a reason, the only one who had ever said, "You don't have to be the best, just be yourself." He was gone, taking with him the last anchor I had in that cold family. The funeral, at St. Helena's Church, my mother continued, her voice choking. The family wants you to come back. This is a chance to heal. Heal. The word sounded like a joke. I was silent, unable to speak, unwilling to speak. In my mind, images of Grandpa appeared, his calloused hands placed over mine, teaching me to spin the wheel, teaching me patience. Clay isn't in a hurry, and neither should people be. Barrett, are you still there? Mom called. I will come, I replied, my voice so soft that even I could barely hear it. The call ended. The phone slipped from my hand, falling onto the wooden table, the screen still glowing. I stood there amid the shards of the broken vase, amid the smell of clay and glaze, amid the Livingston afternoon that remained as quiet as if nothing had happened. But inside me, everything was collapsing. I knelt down, picking up the broken pieces of porcelain one by one. Each sharp shard cut into my skin, but I felt no pain. Only cold, bone-chilling cold, like the day I was 18, leaving home without anyone knowing. Like the day I realized I was just a shadow in my own family. 8 years. I had built a new life here. This pottery studio was my home. The apprentices were my friends. The vases and bowls I shaped were my breath. I had thought I had escaped Bozeman, escaped that family that only knew how to love with words, with appearances, with achievements. But now, Grandpa was gone, and I had to go back. I stood up, wiping my hands on my shirt. The pile of shards still lay there, glinting in the afternoon sunlight. I looked at them for a long time. Then I grabbed the broom and swept them clean. Not keeping a single piece. That vase was dead. Like Grandpa. Like a part of me. I closed the studio early. For the first time in 8 years. I drove back to my small rented house on the outskirts, opened the closet, and took out the only black suit I owned. The one I bought for the studio's first exhibition. I folded it carefully into a suitcase, taking nothing else. Just one set of clothes, documents, and an old photo of me and Grandpa beside the small pottery studio by the river. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window looking out at the Absaroka Range sinking into darkness. I thought about him. About the afternoons he picked me up when my parents were busy building their careers with Zalvarm, when my brother was busy being a star, when my sister was busy being the princess. Only him, only the pottery studio, only the smell of clay and his hoarse laughter. I wondered, if I didn't go back, would he blame me? If I did go back, would I have the strength to face that family? My father, who had never looked at me with pride. My mother, who had never defended me even once. My brother, who always saw me as a loser. My sister, who was always forgiven just because she was still young. I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I had to go back. For him. For myself. I sat in the old pickup, the engine growling along Interstate 90 heading toward Bozeman. Miles of endless road stretched ahead, flanked by the golden, wilted grasslands of late autumn, with the jagged Bridger Mountains dusted in white snow far in the distance. Cold winds slipped through the cracked open window, carrying the scent of dry grass and basalt soil. I turned on the radio, but it only crackled with weak signals. Eventually, I shut it off, letting the silence swallow me whole. And in that silence, memories flooded back like a deluge. The old house appeared vividly in my mind. A two-story Victorian mansion, painted white, with a red-tiled roof, a pale blue wooden fence, and a front yard filled with the rose garden my mother meticulously tended. From the outside, it looked warm, like the cover of an architecture magazine. Large glass windows, white voile curtains fluttering, smoke lazily rising from the chimney on winter evenings. But stepping through the heavy oak door, the air inside was as cold as an ice cellar. Laughter was rare, praise even rarer. There was only the sound of my father typing in his study, my mother flipping through fashion magazines, my brother Caden loudly recounting football stories, and my sister Mira whining for new toys. My father, Cohen Reed, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with slicked back hair. Always in a gray or navy suit, his tie knotted so tightly it seemed to choke him. He managed a well-known construction materials company in Montana. Every morning he woke at 5, drank black coffee without sugar, read the financial papers, then dove into meetings and million-dollar contracts. To him, achievement was the only measure of a person's worth. An A+ on the report card, a football championship trophy, first place in a debate competition. Those were the things that made him pause, pat a shoulder, and smile. Everything else was just air. I remember once bringing home a report card full of A's except for a B+ in gym because I hated running. I nervously placed the paper on the dinner table, waiting. Dad glanced at it, frowned. B+ in gym? Are you planning to be an office clerk your whole life? Then he turned to Caden, who had just scored the winning touchdown in the semifinals. Son, I'm proud of you. Caden grinned widely, receiving a shoulder pat so firm it made his shirt ripple. I quietly folded the paper, stuffed it into my bag, and swallowed the lump in my throat. My mother, Leilani Reed, was the complete opposite. Petite, with long golden hair tied low, always in pale floral dresses, a faint scent of Chanel perfume. She was gentle with everyone outside, neighbors, book club friends, grocery store clerks. But inside the house, she wielded silence like a weapon. She believed silence preserved harmony, preserved the perfect facade of the Reed family. My older brother, Caden, 3 years my senior, was a miniature version of Dad, tall, broad-shouldered, with a confident smile that sparkled under stadium lights. He was captain of the Bozeman High football team, earned a sports scholarship to the University of Montana, then came back as vice president of sales at Dad's company. Wherever Caden went, people clapped, took photos, praised him. Caden Reed, the future of Montana's construction industry, Dad would say, eyes gleaming. And I was just Caden's little brother, the faint shadow behind the spotlight. My younger sister, Mira, 5 years my junior, was Mom's little princess. Curly golden hair, blue eyes, voice sweet as candy. Mira could spill coffee on the Persian rug and Mom would just smile. You're still little, it's okay. Mira could skip school to hang out with friends, and Dad would frown but forget by evening. And me, the middle child, not outstanding enough to be proud of, not young enough to be pampered. I was the blurred shadow in the perfect family portrait. I got good grades but never valedictorian. I played piano but never competed. I helped with chores but no one praised me. Gradually, I grew used to being forgotten. I learned to stay quiet, to shrink myself, to stop waiting for a pat on the back or a hug. At dinner, I sat at the end of the table, ate quickly, spoke little. My room was on the top floor, tiny, with a window overlooking the neighbor's roof. I often sat there, watching Bozeman's city lights flicker, wondering if anyone in this house even remembered me. And fortunately, I had Grandpa Tucker. He retired early, bought a small plot by the Gallatin River, and built a little pine wood pottery studio. He was tall and thin with snow-white hair, calloused hands scarred from years as a carpenter, but his eyes were kind and warm like a winter hearth. Every Friday, he drove his beat-up Ford F-150 to pick me up after school. "Hop in, kid. Today we're making a flower vase." I climbed in, the scent of leather and tobacco wafting from his jacket. His pottery studio was tucked behind weeping willows with a green tin roof. Inside, a foot-powered wheel, an old gas kiln, and dozens of porcelain vases lining the walls. He taught me to shape clay from the red lumps he dug himself from the riverbank. "Clay has a soul too, son. Treat it gently and it'll listen." He told old stories about his youth building houses for others, about Grandma dying young, about how mischievous my dad was as a kid. I sat beside him, hands caked in clay, listening. There, I didn't have to be exceptional. I just had to be myself. "Not everyone who lives under the same roof knows how to love," he said once when I told him about Dad scolding me for breaking a glass. He placed his rough but warm hand on my shoulder. "Home is where you're loved, not where you have to prove yourself. If no one here sees you, come to me. I see you." With him, I finally felt I had value. He hung the vases I made on the wall, even if they were lopsided, even if the glaze ran. "Beautiful, kid. It's got soul." He taught me patience. Clay isn't in a hurry, and neither should people be. He taught me to listen. To the wheels spin, the clay's softness under my hands, the river flowing outside. Those afternoons with him were the only warmth in my cold childhood. I often slept over on weekends on the fold-out bed in the studio, listening to owls at night, the rich smell of earth woven into the blankets. Once I asked him, "Why don't you live with Dad?" He smiled sadly. "Your dad's busy building houses for others, forgot to build one for himself." I didn't understand then, but now I do. Grandpa was the only one who truly saw me. Not through the lens of achievement, not through weak silence, but through my own hands, through what I created from clay. One June morning, the year I turned 18, the sky over Bozeman was crystal clear, sunlight pouring like honey over the rooftops. I had just graduated high school. Not valedictorian, not top of the class, just a name buried in a long list. No one came to my graduation. Dad was busy signing contracts. Mom, my brother, and my sister, they didn't show up either. That day I wondered, if I vanished, would anyone notice? I decided to find out. The next morning I woke early, packed my old backpack, a few changes of clothes, the notebook Grandpa gave me for my birthday last year, $2,300 saved from weekend shifts at the bakery, and a small photo of Grandpa snapping me beside the pottery wheel. No note, no goodbye text. I locked my bedroom door, went down to the basement, grabbed my bike, and disappeared into the Bozeman dawn. The air was still misty, streets empty, only the clatter of my chain and my breath fogging in the cold. I headed south, through Livingston, past Yellowstone Gate, then onto I-90 toward Colorado. My legs ached, sweat soaked my shirt, but my heart felt strangely light. I stopped at a rest area near Big Timber, bought a bottle of water, sat on a stone bench watching trucks roar by. My phone was on silent in the backpack. I didn't check, didn't want to know. On the third day, I reached Boulder, a small city nestled beneath the Flatirons, air crisp, full of students on bikes, indie coffee shops, and brick-paved streets. I rented a basement room off Pearl Street, 6 square meters, single bed, shared kitchen, bathroom down the hall, $450 a month. The landlady was a widow, Mrs. Rose, pale blue eyes, silver hair, and a ponytail. She handed me the key with a smile. "Welcome to freedom, young man." I applied to the Applied Arts program at the University of Colorado Boulder. My file was thin. Decent grades, a recommendation from my art teacher, and a portfolio. Charcoal sketches, a few pottery photos taken on my phone. I waited. Every day I biked around the city watching students laugh and talk, listening to acoustic music drifting from sidewalk cafes. For the first time, I didn't have to explain who I was or prove I deserved to exist. While waiting, I needed money. I got a daytime job at Auto Haven Garage, cleaning spark plugs, changing oil, learning to remove tires by hand. The owner, Miguel, a Mexican man with a thick beard, taught me, "Cars are like people. You have to listen to fix them." Evenings, I waited tables at the Sink, a famous burger joint with graffiti-covered walls. I carried trays, wiped tables, smiled at customers, collected tips in loose quarters. My hands grew calloused, my back ached. But every night I returned to my room, counted the money, and logged expenses. $12 for food, $3 for gas, $5 for miscellany. I learned to cook instant noodles with eggs, hand-wash laundry, patch torn jeans. My phone stayed silent. No calls. No texts. No one asking, "Where's Barrett?" I checked for the first time on day 5. Only spam emails and a low battery alert. I laughed, but tears rolled down. The brutal truth. My absence left no void in that Bozeman house. Dad was in meetings. Mom was at afternoon tea. Caden was partying. Mira was taking selfies. I was just a shadow. Gone and no one noticed. Instead of despair, I chose resolve. I would prove it, not to them but to myself. I was accepted. Partial scholarship. I took out loans for the rest. First class, sculpting form with clay. The professor, Elena, short purple-dyed hair, said, "Clay doesn't lie. It reflects you." I shaped. My hands shook, but the clay obeyed. I remembered Grandpa. The wheels spin, his hoarse laugh. I made a lopsided vase, olive green glaze. Elena hung it on the wall. Beautiful imperfection. Life was harsh, but I was free. No one compared me to Caden. No one said I was still little, like Mira. No one sighed when I came home late. I took care of myself, cooked, cleaned, learned to sleep on the sofa when rent was short. Every night after my shift, I sat by the basement window watching Boulder's lights flicker, thinking of Grandpa. I opened the notebook and wrote, "Today I made a 40-centimeter vase. Glaze cracked slightly, but beautiful. Grandpa would like it." I taped his photo, him by the wheel, on the wall next to the exam schedule. I worked extra hours in the school pottery studio, free in exchange for clay and kiln access. I made vases, bowls, cups, sold them at weekend markets to pay debts. Once an old lady bought a small bowl and said, "It has soul, like it was made with love." I smiled, tears welling. I sent money to Mrs. Rose when she fell ill, fixed Miguel's car for free when his kid got in an accident. I learned to give without expecting return. The farther I got from Bozeman, the clearer it became. Family isn't where you're born, but where you're truly loved. Grandpa was the only family I ever had. My new friends in Boulder, Jax, the street artist, Lena, the cafe waitress. They asked how I was, they listened, they laughed when I told stories of broken vases. I was no longer a shadow. I was Barrett, potter, student, worker, alive. In my second year, I opened a tiny studio in a rented garage, Still Hands Mini Edition. I taught neighborhood kids to shape clay in exchange for cookies and laughter. I graduated with a thesis on pottery as psychological therapy. Grandpa didn't attend, but I brought the diploma home, placed it on a small altar in the studio, lit incense. I did it, Grandpa. 4 years passed like a gust of wind. I returned to Montana, opened the still hands in Livingston. I never called Bozeman. No need. I had found freedom. In every lump of clay, every turn of the wheel, every breath no longer caged by indifference. I had proven it, not with money or fame, but with my own hands, with the life I chose. And now, as the pickup roared past the sign, Bozeman, 10 miles, I smiled. I was no longer the 18-year-old runaway. I was Barrett Reed, the one who vanished to find himself and now returned, not to prove anything, but to close an old chapter with the forgiveness Grandpa taught me. Clay can break, but it can always be reshaped. So can I. I turned off the radio, letting the wind whistle through the cracked window fill the cabin. Bozeman gradually appeared. Familiar streets, maple trees blazing red, the gigantic Reed Building Supplies sign beside the highway. Stylized R logo, painted navy blue, as proud as my father. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. My mother's call still echoed in my head, trembling voice, the invitation to heal. I knew I had to return. For him. For the final right I could offer the man who saw me when the world turned away. St. Helena's Church stood in the heart of Bozeman, its steeple soaring, stained glass shimmering in the afternoon sun. I parked in the back lot, slipped into my black suit, the only one I'd brought, a bit tight since I'd built muscle over 4 years hauling clay. I stepped inside. The heavy scent of lilies hit me, the organ's mournful notes reverberating. The polished oak coffin sat in the center aisle, draped in white lilies. I quietly took a seat in the front row beside Grandpa's photo. Gentle smile, eyes squinting against river sunlight. My family filled the front pews. Dad in a gray suit, black tie, hair slicked back. Mom in a long black dress, veil half covering her face, pearl rosary in hand. Caden in navy, Mira in a tight black dress, hair in a high bun. They looked at me, smiled. Polite, distant smiles. Dad patted my shoulder. "Long time no see, son." Mom hugged me, familiar Chanel scent. "Good that you're back." Caden whispered, "You've lost weight, bro." Mira, eyes brimming, "I missed you." I nodded, silent. I knew they were performing. I knew they hadn't missed me. I knew they only wanted me here so it looked proper. The service began. The priest read prayers, voice warm and low. Family members took turns with eulogies. Dad spoke of the hero who built Reed Group. Mom sobbed, recounting the kind father. Caden recalled how Grandpa taught me leadership. Mira read a poem, voice quivering. I sat, hands clasped, eyes on the coffin. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Grandpa's lessons weren't for microphones. They lived in calloused hands in the riverside pottery shed. The funeral ended. People shook hands, hugged, posed for photos beside the casket. I stood at the end of the line, receiving perfunctory shoulder pats. Then Dad took my hand, voice deep and warm. "Come home for dinner?" It's been ages since the whole family gathered. Mom added, "We need to stick together, Barrett." I nodded, not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to see how far the pretense would go. The old house hadn't changed. White Victorian mansion, Mom's meticulously tended rose garden, large windows with fluttering voile curtains. Inside, the aroma of roast beef and mashed potatoes rose, a lavish dinner. Long table, white cloth, flickering candles. I took the end seat as always. They laughed and chatted, recalled old stories. "Remember when Barrett broke the antique vase?" Loud laughter. "Caden scored the game winner." Applause. They asked me, "How's the pottery studio?" "Is Livingston nice?" They kept repeating family bonds, unity, and a family shares joy and hardship, words I'd never heard in 18 years under that roof. I ate. I nodded. I stayed silent. Inside, ice cold. I saw the veneer clearly. Smiles that didn't reach eyes, pats a little too hard, glances that slid past me like I was air. A few days later, a letter from the lawyer's office arrived. Reading of Tucker Reed's will, 10 a.m. Friday. I arrived early, white shirt, jeans. No suit. The office was on the third floor of a red brick building smelling of coffee and old paper. My family already filled the room. Dad, Mom, Caden, Mira, a few distant relatives. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, silver hair, gold-rimmed glasses, sat at the head, opened the sealed envelope. Will dated March 12th this year, he read evenly. All assets, Riverside House on the Gallatin, 15 acres, pottery studio, $1.2 million savings account, bequeathed to Barrett Reed, accompanied by a letter. The room sank into heavy silence. I felt every stare, like knives. Dad slammed the table, wood shuddering. He shot up, face crimson, eyes blazing straight at me. "Get home now! We need to talk this through." His voice boomed like thunder. Caden raised an eyebrow, thin smile, the one I'd seen after football victories. "We need to discuss this. Barrett can't just take Grandpa's entire estate alone." Light tone, but razor sharp. Mira scowled, lips tight, eyes flashing, not grief, but fury. She clutched Mom's hand, whispered something. Mom sat frozen, anxious eyes flicking to me, then down to the table, silent. Relatives murmured, "How could this happen? The kid who ran off 8 years ago." I felt the envy, the disappointment behind their calm masks. The air thickened, like wet clay before firing. I took the letter. Yellowed paper, Grandpa's shaky handwriting. "Barrett, you're the only one who understands the value of hands. Keep it, grow it, and remember. Don't let it become a burden." I folded the letter, slipped it into my pocket, said nothing. I stood, walked out. Dad roared behind me, "Barrett, stop." But I didn't turn back. I left the lawyer's office, descended the creaking wooden stairs, stepped into the glaring Bozeman sun. The old pickup waited, engine growling like an invitation back to Livingston. I climbed in, drove straight, never glancing in the rearview mirror. But they didn't let me go that easily. That evening, a text from Mom lit up my screen. "Come home for dinner? Everyone's here. Relatives too. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the reply key. I knew this wasn't an invitation born of affection. It was a summons. Still, I typed back, "I'll be there." For Grandpa. Because I wanted to see with my own eyes how ugly greed disguised as family love could get. The old house blazed with lights like a festival. Cars packed the driveway, Dad's BMW, Caden's Jeep, Mira's pink Mini Cooper, and several SUVs from distant relatives. I parked outside the gate, walked through Mom's meticulously pruned rose garden. The heavy scent of damp earth and blooms thick in the air. The door swung open. Mom hugged me on the threshold. "You're here." The familiar Chanel perfume, but her arms stiff like embracing a stranger. Inside, the living room overflowed with people. Relatives from Billings, Helena, Missoula, Uncle Ted with his bushy beard, Aunt Margaret in sapphire glasses, cousins with wives and kids. Laughter boomed, wine glasses clinked. The aroma of grilled meat and garlic bread wafted everywhere. The long dining table had been dragged into the living room, white cloth, flickering candles, white lilies centerpiece, just like the funeral, but now for unity. I was pushed into the end seat as always. Dad at the head, gray suit, tie loosened, face flushed from wine. Mom to his right, black dress, pearl rosary glinting. Caden to his left, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. Mira in a tight red dress, no longer funeral black. Relatives surrounded us, eyes skimming me like an appetizer. Dinner began. Rare roast beef, buttery mashed potatoes, organic vegetable salad. They laughed and chattered. "Remember when Barrett broke the antique vase?" Uncle Ted roared. "Caden scored the game winner," Aunt Margaret clapped. Then they turned to me. "How's the pottery studio in Livingston?" "How's business?" I answered curtly. Good. Fine. They nodded, but their eyes never left the letter bulging in my shirt pocket. Every conversation circled sharing, unity, and family. Dad raised his glass. The Reeds must stick together. Glasses clinked. Caden added, share joy and hardship. That's true family. Mira, eyes brimming. We're one family, right, Barrett? I nodded, sipped the red wine, bitter and astringent, like the pretense spreading through the room. I understood perfectly. This wasn't family. It was a shell for greed slowly surfacing. They didn't ask how I'd lived the past 8 years. They didn't ask what Grandpa taught me. They only saw the letter, the $1.2 million inheritance, the 15 acres, the Riverside Pottery Studio. Their eyes gleamed, not for me but for the numbers. As dinner neared its end, dessert, Mom's homemade tiramisu, was served. Dad stood. His wine glass trembled slightly, his voice heavy, loaded. Barrett, we need to talk seriously. The room fell silent. Cutlery stopped clinking. Every eye locked on me. Dad set his glass down, fist clenched. You shouldn't keep everything alone. Grandpa, surely didn't mean that. This is family heritage. Caden needs a house to start a family. Mira needs tuition for study abroad. We have to share. I stayed calm. I laid down my knife and fork, wiped my mouth with the napkin, voice even. I want to honor Grandpa's wishes. He wrote it clearly. Dad's jaw tightened, face crimson. From wine, from rage. He slammed the table, glasses rattling. Wishes? The old man was senile. You think you deserve more than the rest of us? Caden arched an eyebrow, thin, contemptuous smile. Without Mom and Dad, where would Barrett be sitting right now? You ran off for 8 years, now come back to hog everything? Don't be selfish. Mira fake cried, tears rolling. But I saw it clearly. Her eyes flashed with anger. You've changed. You're not the old Barrett anymore. How can you be so heartless to your family? Relatives started murmuring. Uncle Ted shook his head. The boy's forgotten his roots. Aunt Margaret whispered to her husband. Betraying family. Such an ingrate. Cousins chimed in. Split it evenly, that's fair. Contempt and envy seeped through every word, every gesture. The side eye, the sneer, the clenched fists. I sat there, taking it all in, heart pounding but hands steady. I felt the hypocrisy slowly strangling the room like wet clay squeezed too hard, cracking from within. The atmosphere swiftly turned into open attack. Dad slammed the table again, wood thundering. Barrett, do the right thing. This is family property, not just yours. Insults poured like hail. Selfish, ungrateful, traitor. Grandpa would be disappointed if he knew. Mom sat silent, anxious eyes flicking to me, then down to the table, twisting her pearl rosary. Not a word in my defense, as always. I stood. No shouting, no arguing. Just said, I'll keep Grandpa's promise. Then I walked out. Dad roared behind me. Stop! But I didn't turn back. I passed down the long hallway, past family photos on the wall, fake smiles, distant eyes. I opened the door, stepped into the yard. Cold wind blew, carrying rose and basalt scents. The dinner ended in heavy silence. I heard relatives muttering behind me. The kid's gone bad. What an ingrate. I got in the truck, shut the door, started the engine. The old house's lights reflected distorted on the windshield like their faces. I drove away from Bozeman, mind churning. Not with pain, but with pity for Grandpa. He left me an inheritance, but also a burden. The burden of greed masquerading as love. On the way back to Livingston, I pulled over by the Gallatin River. Moon bright, water rushing, carrying dry pine needles. I took out the letter, reread it under the moonlight. Don't let it become a burden. I smiled, tears rolling. I wouldn't let it be a burden. I'd turn it into healing, not for them, but for forgotten souls like me. I'd expand the studio, teach poor kids, build a community. That was Grandpa's true wish. I drove back to Livingston as dawn broke, mist still lingering over Paradise Valley. The Still Hands studio greeted me with the familiar scent of damp earth, the kiln humming like an old friend. I unlocked the door, flicked on the neon lights, and sank my hands into a fresh block of clay. Soft, cool, like a greeting from Grandpa across the distance. I shaped a tall vase, slender neck, flared mouth, the style he once praised. The wheel spun steadily, the clay gliding under my fingers, chasing away every echo Bozeman had left behind. But my family wouldn't leave me in peace. They spread the news. Anonymous posts with headlines, "Reed family traitor seizes Grandpa's inheritance." "Ungrateful," comments poured in. "That Barrett ran off for 8 years now comes back to steal." I scrolled through, heart stinging but hands steady. I posted a photo of the new vase on the studio's page, "Still Hands, where clay tells stories." Surrounded by judgment, I chose silence. Every morning I rose at 5, brewed black coffee, opened the studio. I expanded the space, rented the old warehouse next door, laid pine wood floors, installed new wheels. I hired 3 young apprentices from the area. Tommy, the orphaned native boy who loved graffiti. Sarah, the 19-year-old dropout pregnant and needing a trade to raise her child. And Luis, the undocumented Mexican with skilled hands. I taught them to throw clay, glaze, sell, in exchange for smiles, sandwiches, and laughter echoing through the studio. Time passed. The calls grew sparse. Accusatory emails turned to silence. Pleading texts stopped entirely. No one mentioned splitting the estate. No one checked in. Everything went quiet, as if I had never existed in that family. I wasn't sad. I felt light. The studio grew. I joined the Bozeman Craft Fair. Without visiting home, I still sold olive-glazed porcelain vases, bowls carved with mountain patterns, dainty teacups. Customers lined up. Local papers wrote, "The Still Hands, Montana Pottery's New Breath." I started free Saturday classes. Poor kids, the unemployed, PTSD veterans. They shaped clay, cried, laughed, found themselves again. I hung their pieces on the wall beside the vase Grandpa once praised. One autumn afternoon, golden sunlight streamed through the studio windows. I sat on the old wooden bench sipping cold coffee. My phone buzzed, a local news alert. The article said my father was mired in lawsuits, drowning in debt. I clicked. A photo of Dad, hair snow-white, suit wrinkled, standing outside the Billings courthouse, eyes ringed with exhaustion. The story detailed overexpansion, failed contracts, banks foreclosing. Caden was embroiled in financial scandal, embezzling funds for crypto investments, now under investigation. Mira remained jobless, holed up with Mom in the old house. Rose garden withered, white fence peeling. I finished reading, set the phone down. No grief, no satisfaction, just emptiness, like gazing at a faded old painting. Dad, once proud and powerful, now facing court. Caden, once the star, now in legal chains. Mira, once the princess, now curled up indoors. Mom silent as always. In that moment, I realized time doesn't just fade pain. It helps release, so you can live on. I was no longer angry, no longer waiting. All I had left was the studio, the apprentices, and Grandpa's legacy. Not money, but hands that know how to create beauty from earth. The days in Livingston flowed gently, like the Yellowstone River in autumn. The Still Hands studio now had 2 new gas kilns, a small exhibition corner with warm LED lights, and the laughter of Tommy, Sarah, and Luis echoing from morning to night. I woke early, brewed black coffee in a crackle-glazed mug I'd thrown myself, opened the door to the mountain breeze, then sank my hands into clay, soft, cool like Grandpa's whisper. Patience, kid. Clay's in no hurry. I no longer checked emails from Bozeman. I no longer scrolled local Facebook groups. My life was tall vases with slender necks, free Saturday classes, afternoons by the kiln telling kids about the grandpa who taught his son how to turn dirt into gold. I thought I had fully closed the old chapter, until one late November evening. The air was biting cold, first snowflakes drifting past the studio windows. I was cleaning up, wiping the wheel, stacking freshly fired bowls, switching off the last neon light. My phone buzzed on the oak table. Unknown number. A short message on the cracked screen. I'd dropped it the week before. Son, save your father. Everything is collapsing. I stood frozen in the darkened studio, only the kiln's red glow flickering. The smell of scorched glaze mingled with cold snow seeping through the door crack. My heart pounded, not with anger, but with something ancient, deep, like a scar I thought healed, throbbing again. I sat on the old wooden bench, hands trembling slightly as I opened the will letter. Yellowed paper creased from being carried everywhere. Grandpa's shaky handwriting under the desk lamp. Don't let what I leave you become a burden. Turn it into a place for people to heal. I read it over and over. Heal. Not for me. I had healed myself with clay and freedom. For them. For the family that once turned away, humiliated me, turned greed into love. I wondered, if Grandpa were alive, would he want to see Dad haggard in court? Caden broken by legal chains? Mira curled up in the old house? Mom crying alone amid withered roses? I knew the answer. He wouldn't. He'd say, "Kid, your hands don't just shape vases, they reshape people's broken pieces." Many nights after I couldn't sleep, I sat by the kiln watching the fire flicker, thinking of Bozeman, of the riverside house, old green tin roof, foot-powered wheel, the rich smell of river clay, of Grandpa sitting there telling old stories, teaching patience. I wrestled between pity and caution. Pity, because they were blood after all. Caution, because I knew greed could wear repentance's mask. But in the end, the last sliver of compassion won. Not duty, not forgiveness. Opportunity, for them to redeem themselves as Grandpa wished. I decided to return to Bozeman. I drove on a thick snow morning. I-90 was slick, tires rolling slowly over fresh white. Bozeman emerged through fog, the St. Helena steeple hazy, the Reed Group sign now removed, only a bare iron frame. I turned onto the old road to Grandpa's house, now mine by will. The small pine house by the Gallatin was in ruins, tin roof punctured, windows shattered, weeds choking the yard. The pottery studio beside it dust-covered, the wheel missing a leg, kiln stone cold. I parked, entered the main house, the once white Victorian mansion, paint peeling, fence leaning, rose garden dead. The door was ajar. I knocked lightly. Mom answered, hair snow white, eyes ringed dark, gray dress rumpled. She looked at me, eyes wide, then down. "Barrett." Inside, the air was frigid. Dad sat in the old armchair, suit wrinkled, hands shaking around a whiskey glass. Caden sprawled on the sofa, eyes bloodshot, stubble thick. Mira huddled in the corner, hair tangled, eyes swollen. No one spoke, only wind whistling through broken panes. They looked at me awkwardly, like seeing a ghost from the past. I broke the silence. "I'm here to help, but with conditions." Their eyes lifted, hope mixed with suspicion. I continued. "Preserve this house, Grandpa's house. Restart the pottery studio within 5 years. I oversee remotely. Dad handles finances. Caden operations. Mira personnel. No salary first month. Just a chance." Dad opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand. "If you want dignity back, start by doing right, building from the legacy you once scorned." No one dared object. Dad bowed his head. Caden nodded faintly. Mira whispered, "Okay." Mom grasped my hand, trembling. "Thank you, son." In the months that followed, I guided step by step, via Zoom, email, a few drives back. I sent the plan. Fix the tin roof, replace the gas kiln, buy red clay from the riverbank. Dad managed finances. Sold remaining Reed Group lots, paid bank debts in installments. He worked carefully, voice hoarse on calls. Where's cheap olive green glaze? Caden ran the studio, hauling clay, throwing wheels, firing. At first reluctant, cursing when vases cracked. But gradually when the first vase sold for $80 at the craft fair, he smiled. The first real smile I'd seen in years. Mira handled personnel, hired 2 local apprentices, minimum wage, taught them bowls. She wore a clay-stained apron, hair tied high, voice gentle. Easy hands, Clay listens. Mom cooked for the studio, sandwiches, pumpkin soup, brought lunch daily, sat watching everyone work, eyes shining. At first, everyone resisted. Dad grumbled, "Why handmade? Machines are faster." Caden left early, exhausting. Mira cried, "My hands are blistered." But gradually, as products sold, crackle-glazed vases carved with Bridger Mountains, dainty teacups, customers returned. Money flowed. They changed. Dad stayed up calculating books, eyes bright at profit. Caden threw his first tall vase, grinning. "Looks like yours, Barrett." Mira organized a small exhibition, invited press, voice confident. "This is Grandpa's legacy." They learned to respect each other. Dad praised Caden. "Good job." Caden carried for Mira. "Rest your hands." Mira cooked for Dad. "Eat, no more whiskey." Most importantly, they respected their own effort. Calloused hands, sweat on clay, smiles when a piece came out perfect. I didn't reclaim old family bonds. No tearful hugs. No brothers. Just short calls. This month, profit $2,000. 50 bowls ordered. I felt lighter. I had saved them. Not with money, but with a chance to redeem themselves. As Grandpa wanted. One spring afternoon, I drove back to check. The studio glowed, new tin roof, wheels spinning steady. Dad stood by the kiln, hair silver but back straight. Caden threw a vase, hands surer than before. Mira smiled with new apprentices. Mom brought a tray of sandwiches, looked at me. "Eat?" I nodded. We sat by the river, ate, listened to the water. No one mentioned the past. Only clay gliding under fingers, the kiln's low rumble. I stood, patted Dad's shoulder. "Keep it up." He nodded, eyes red. I got in the truck, drove to Livingston. On the way, I opened the old letter. "Heal." I smiled. I had done it. Not with words, but with clay, opportunity, and the last bit of compassion. Clay can break, but it can always be reshaped. So can they. So can I. Back in Livingston, I plunged straight into work as if Bozeman had been nothing more than a fleeting dream. The Still Hands studio welcomed me with the scent of damp earth, the low rumble of the kiln, and the laughter of Tommy, Sarah, and Luis as they stacked freshly fired bowls onto the pine shelves. I shed my jacket, tied on my apron, and plunged my hands into a block of river-red clay. Soft, cool, like a distant greeting from Grandpa. I shaped a tall vase with a slender neck and flared mouth, the style he once called soulful. The wheel spun steadily, the clay gliding under my fingers, sweeping away every lingering echo of Bozeman. I poured most of my time into the studio. Early mornings I rose at 5, brewed black coffee in the crackle-glazed mug I'd thrown myself, opened the door to the Absaroka mountain breeze. I expanded the free vocational classes, not just Saturdays but Wednesday afternoons too. Unemployed workers from the shuttered paper mill in Milltown, troubled teens from the reform camp near Helena, native children from the Crow Reservation. They arrived with worn backpacks, trembling hands, eyes full of doubt. I taught them to throw clay, glaze, sell. I promised no riches, only this. Your hands will tell your own story. There was a boy named Eli, 14, fatherless, mother an alcoholic, once caught shoplifting. His hands shook the first time he touched clay. "I can't do this," he whispered. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Clay doesn't judge. Just be patient. 3 months later, Eli threw a bowl carved with the Bridger Mountains, olive green glaze. He sold it for $40 at the craft fair, eyes shining. "I bought new shoes for my little sister." I smiled, tears welling. That was when I knew. Grandpa's legacy wasn't just the studio, it was healed hands. One August afternoon at the local art fair, golden sunlight bathed Livingston's town square. I brought 10 crackle-glazed vases, 5 teacup sets etched with Yellowstone River patterns. Small booth, pine table, warm LED lights. Crowds buzzed, laughter filled the air. I was wiping a vase when a gentle voice came from behind. "This one's beautiful. Is the crackle natural or intentional?" I turned. A woman with brown hair and a low ponytail, green eyes, white linen dress, handmade silver bracelet. "Intentional," I smiled. "Clay sometimes needs cracks to breathe." She laughed, eyes crinkling. "I'm June, art teacher in Missoula, looking for a partner on a school project." We talked until the fair closed. June spoke of her students, refugee children from Syria, Ukraine, kids who'd seen bombs fall. They need something to hold, to create, to believe they still control something. I nodded. Clay's the best therapy. We exchanged numbers, promised to meet again. From there, we collaborated. June brought students to the studio on weekends. I taught throwing. She taught pattern painting. Together, we designed school ceramic sets, lunch bowls, water jugs, teacups, sold for fundraising. Time passed. Post-work coffees, sunset drives along the Yellowstone, nights by the kiln swapping stories. I told her about Grandpa, Bozeman, the forgotten years. June spoke of her father, a wood sculptor who died young, her mother a piano teacher in Missoula. We didn't confess love. It just happened. Holding hands crossing the street, a light kiss when June dropped a vase. "Good luck," she laughed. Love arrived gently like glaze flowing evenly over a pot. Meanwhile, the Bozeman studio recovered. Monthly reports, revenue up 30%, Yellowstone tourists buying crackle vases, local papers, Reed Pottery Studio, exemplary Montana traditional craft. Dad sent photos. Him by the new kiln, silver hair but straight back. Caden throwing tall vases, Mira organizing small exhibitions. They didn't say brother, but their voices warmed. "Thanks, Barrett." The following year, the Montana Crafts Association held the Creator Contributing to Community Award at the Ellen Theater in Bozeman. I wore my black suit, now fitting better, stood center stage under bright lights. The MC announced, "Barrett Reed." The still hands. Thunderous applause. I took the mic, heart racing, voice steady. "I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about Grandpa Tucker Reed, who taught me that hands capable of creating beauty are never useless. He taught me patience, to listen to Clay, that beauty begins with kindness. His legacy isn't money, it's healed hands. Tommy's, Sarah's, Eli's, and hundreds more. Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you all." I bowed. Applause lingered. June sat front row, eyes glistening. Afterward, we launched Hands of Hope. June quit teaching in Missoula, moved to Livingston. We rented an old riverside warehouse, laid pine floors, installed 10 wheels. We taught orphans from Helena's children's home, lost souls from rehab centers, PTSD veterans. They shaped clay, cried, laughed, found faith again. A boy named Amir, 12, Syrian refugee, threw his first bowl etched with his old Aleppo home. He sold it for $50, bought books for his sister. "I want to be an artist," he said. I hugged him, tears rolling. Press wrote, "Barrett Reed, the artisan who turns pain into legacy." The community called me the storyteller in clay. I wasn't proud of titles. I was proud of preserving Grandpa's spiritual legacy, kindness, perseverance, belief that beauty starts with hands. That award night, the Bozeman family watched on TV. Dad sat frozen before the old set, whiskey glass trembling. Mom teared up when I mentioned Grandpa, clutching her pearls. Caden bowed his head. Mira whispered, "He did it." They didn't call, but I knew. They had changed. June and I went home to our small riverside wooden house, big windows, warm hearth. We sat by the kiln, drank tea from Amir's cup, listened to the river. June held my hand. "You're the best storyteller I know." I smiled, kissed her hair lightly. Clay can break, but it can always be reshaped. So can life. I had reshaped mine, from pain, from legacy, from love. And now, I had it all. Years passed like the Yellowstone in summer, gentle yet brimming with life. The Still Hand studio had become a small complex. 3 connected pine warehouses, slanted roofs, moss-covered green, a backyard of riverstone paths leading to the water's edge. The Free Hands of Hope classes welcomed hundreds of kids each year. Orphans, veterans, the once lost, all returning to Clay as if returning to themselves. June and I split the teaching. She drew patterns, I taught form, laughing together when pots cracked, clapping when glaze flowed smooth. One June afternoon, golden sunlight dancing on the river, we married. No church, no long gown, no 5-course menu. Just a small ceremony on the Yellowstone bank beneath weeping willows, wind carrying scents of dry grass and cool water. I wore a white linen shirt, June a pale blue cotton dress printed with wildflowers, hair tied low with a leather cord. Close friends formed a circle. Tommy, now studio manager, Sarah running the bakery next door. Louis head potter, Amir, now 18, strumming a Syrian folk tune on guitar. Former students brought hand-thrown vases as wedding gifts. The officiant, June's old friend, kept vows brief. Keep the fire like glaze, keep love like clay. We exchanged rings, 2 crackle-glazed ceramic bands I threw from river clay, our names etched inside. June laughed, tears rolling. "I love you, Clay storyteller." I kissed her amid applause and the river's soft lapping. A year later, Amin Reed arrived on a lightly snowing December morning. He weighed 3.2 kilos. Green eyes like his mother, curly brown hair like mine. June gave birth in Livingston Hospital. I held her hand through 12 hours of labor, whispering, "Hang on. The Clay's waiting for him." Amin's first cry rang out like a kiln freshly lit. We brought him home, set the pine crib by the hearth, hung a tiny vase carved with the absarokas, gift from the Bozeman studio. Every evening when Amin was 2, I carried him to the kiln, let him lean against my chest, tiny hands touching warm clay. I told stories. Long ago, there was a kind grandpa who taught your dad to turn worthless dirt into vases, teacups, a whole beautiful world. He said, "Trembling hands can still make beauty if the heart stays gentle." Amin giggled, clay-smeared fingers shaping a lopsided ball. "Grandpa!" he squealed. I kissed his forehead, tears falling. Grandpa's legacy lived on, not in money, but in every wheel's turn, every kiln's warmth, every child's smile. The old Bozeman family stayed in occasional touch. Not often, but enough to keep rhythm. Dad sent short emails. "Studio profited $15,000 this month. Thank you." Attached photo, him by the new kiln, hair snow white but eyes bright. Caden video called, "Amin looks like you as a kid. Teach him to throw." His voice warm, contempt gone. Mira mailed Amin's birthday card, hand-drawn cover inside, "Sweet nephew, Aunt hopes to see you at the studio." Mom sent homemade walnut cookies with a handwritten note. "Mom is proud of you." No one mentioned the past. Insults, attacks, pleading texts. Everyone had matured enough to understand pain is only part of the healing journey. The relationship now held only respect, gratitude, and peace. Like glaze flowing evenly over a pot, quiet but enduring. I was occasionally invited to speak. Craft panels in Billings, life workshops in Missoula, Boulder Art School graduations. In linen shirt before the mic, voice steady. We truly mature when we turn wounds into lessons instead of using them to wound others. I was forgotten, I ran, I was humiliated. But Clay taught me, breaking isn't the end. With patience, with kindness, you reshape, more beautiful than before. The audience applauded. I said little else. Just stories of Grandpa, Amin's lopsided lump, Amir selling a bowl to buy his sister books. That was my message. Not every abandonment is loss. Sometimes it's the chance to find yourself. Forgiveness doesn't always need to be spoken, but it always needs to be practiced, first with yourself. True glory lies not in money or fame, but in living true to what you believe. Trembling hands can still create beauty if the heart remains gentle. One golden autumn afternoon, 5, I carried him to the studio. He wore a tiny apron, clay-caked hands, sat at the wheel. "Daddy, I'm making a house," he shouted, throwing 4 crooked walls, a slanted roof, a wobbly chimney. I laughed, sat beside him, hand over his. "Beautiful." "Fire it?" We slid the piece into the kiln together, watched red flames flicker. Amin leaned into me, eyes bright. "Will Grandpa like it, Daddy?" I kissed his forehead. "Grandpa's smiling right now." Watching my son shape clay by the kiln, I smiled. Every turn of the pottery wheel, like life, begins with patience and ends in the light of compassion. Clay can break, but it can always be reshaped. I had reshaped, from pain into legacy, from abandonment into freedom, from loneliness into family. And now, beside June, beside Amin, beside the warm kiln, I knew I had it all.